blah, 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 blah.
Welcome to the Our Forever Smiles podcast, a podcast created to support mothers of children who were born with clefts and those who love them. I'm your host, Laura Arroyo, and I'm also a mother of a daughter who was born with a surprise cleft palate. I know the challenges you face every day, whether you have just learned the difficult news of your baby's cleft lip or palate, you're in the midst of pre-op or post-op, or you're an OG cleft mom. This podcast is for you. In a weekly conversation, we will talk about everything from feeding and speech therapy to surgery and school. We'll share tips from guest experts and advocates and even share a little joy in the process. You can listen to Our Forever Smiles wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned. Hello, and welcome back to the Our Forever Smiles Cleft Mom Diaries and Support podcast. I am Laura Arroyo. Before we jump into this episode, I would like to invite you to join this community to hear conversations with other cleft moms and advocates that will help you feel supported along your journey. All I want you to do is click the follow or a subscribe button. I love your support. It's incredible to see all of us come together. And we're just getting started. I can't wait to go on this journey with you. Thank you so much for subscribing. We have so much in store this year. As a note, we're not medical doctors, and we do not intend for you to use this information that we share here as medical advice. We are parents and advocates who love our children, and we are sharing our own personal experiences. I also want to add that we are not scientists. There's so much misleading information out there and about clefts, and I just don't have all the answers. But one thing I really want to be sure to mention is that nobody has all of the answers. Yeah, I'm going to add that scientist portion to our disclaimer every week. This week has been a whirlwind for me. I just been trying to plan and just be organized with everything that's coming up. And while I've been running around just scheduling appointments with all these specialists for my daughter Giselle for the past year and a half, I forgot that I too need to take care of myself and see a specialist. I live in the United States. I live in North Carolina, and I've been looking online for an OBGYN to get a regular just wellness appointment. And I found out that UNC, which is our major hospital network in North Carolina, has parted ways with Cigna. And so I didn't really know that. I didn't really take the news that hard for myself, but my daughter's cleft team is at UNC. And so I'm really sad and just shocked that I'm going to have to find another option for her. It's truly a bummer to say the least, but we'll survive just like we've survived all of these things that we have gone through. But yeah, that's the latest discovery for me. I'm really excited today. We have a guest. She is really a documentarian of sorts, as I've just looked through her content and just have gotten to know her over these past few days. So she's really been able to really document her journey very well. I'm really bad at social media, and so I admire people that are able to use it as a vehicle for expression, just a tool to build awareness, and of course, just a place to have beautiful memories to reflect. So today we have Jennifer Vincelet. Jennifer is 38 years old. She's a wife. She's been married to her husband, Cody, for 5 years, and she's a mother of 2 beautiful girls. I love girls. I'm sorry. I'm biased. I really wanted a girl when I got pregnant, and I was so excited that I got a girl. So I'm very girl power over here. Amelia is 3 years old, and Anastasia is 20 months old. Welcome, Jennifer.
Hi, Laura. Thank you so much for having me today on this podcast.
So Jennifer has a really interesting story because she actually relocated her family to Philadelphia for 8 months in 2022 to give birth at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. That choice is to just be in the care of one of the top cleft lip and Palate teams there, which I thought that I just find that so like fascinating. And I don't know, for some reason, I don't like using the word brave, but it's just like a bold move, I feel like, to do something like that, or to be able to like have the guts to do that. But when it comes to our children, we do everything that we can to help them, right? To make the best decisions for them. But before we jump into the move, talk to me about when you found out you were pregnant. Were you expecting it, or was it something that just happened?
We had Amelia, and she was a little over 9 months, I think. And we had definitely wanted to add to the family, and we just didn't know when, or so it wasn't completely planned, but we knew that we wanted to add. And so it was a little bit of a surprise, but we were excited and super just excited to add to the family. And we did the genetic testing a little bit early on and found out it was a girl and that Amelia would have a sister. And yes, I was stoked about that coming from a sister family as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's what I tell people too. I'm like, I wasn't necessarily trying to get pregnant, but also wasn't doing anything to not get pregnant. So it's one of those things I was like welcoming it to myself and very excited about that. So what were your pregnancy symptoms?
So I was still breastfeeding Amelia. She was really young. They were about 17 months apart. And I didn't have really much of the sickness, I would say, like morning sickness, but I was so exhausted running after this baby that was on the verge of becoming a toddler. I think the exhaustion was just on a whole nother level at that point. And I just you're like trying to like lay on the couch and get rest. And it's like basically a kid opening up your eyelids. Hello, I'm here.
Oh, yeah.
So, but I really can't complain. Just the normal, but not really morning sickness, I would say, just the bloating but I was on my feet constantly, and I didn't have that chance, like the luxury of the first pregnancy, to just go lay down.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I miss those naps. Oh, God, they'd never come back. Like just those the pregnancy naps that you could just take, like with your first child. Yeah, those are. I took them for granted. My aunt literally told me, when you're pregnant, you're annoyed with everyone's comments, but it's just, go ahead and take all the naps that you can now, honey, because you're not going to have another one for a long time. And she meant well. She was telling the truth, but
yeah. I know. I feel like we're going to be in that position one day, totally giving that advice, right?
Oh,
and trying not to at the same time. You're like, but I can't help myself.
Yeah, it's so funny that people are. I always think to myself, like, why didn't anyone tell me this? And I'm like, actually, everyone told me this. It's just all the things that motherhood can be challenging, and just all the things, right? You've never been able to relate more to something. I look at all the memes and stuff online, and I'm like, wow, I get it now. I thought I got it before, but I really get it now. One thing that I wanted to say, just to clarify, Jennifer has two daughters. Amelia is her baby that is non-Cleft affected, and Anastasia is her Cleft affected baby. And this was your second pregnancy, and I guess having them so close together, because really, Amelia was, I'm pretty sure in your eyes, my daughter is 16 months now, so she's still a baby to me. It was like, you still have a baby at home, right? Like you had them back to back. It's so funny. My daughter is on my screensaver, and we took that picture of her that's on my screensaver when she was about like 11 months. And literally the other day, she looks at the picture and she goes, baby. And I'm like, you are the baby.
Yeah. I know, it's bizarre. They're definitely doing the same thing, and it's just crazy to me. I'm like, oh no, you are the baby.
Yeah. But I just wanted to make that clarification that Anastasia is your Cleft affected baby. And I guess experiencing having a quote unquote normal pregnancy, normal birth, what I guess, and finding out that your daughter was going to be Cleft affected, first of all, when did you find out? And I guess talk me through what your emotions were through that process of just the day that you found out.
Sure. I knew this was coming, so I was having the butterflies and a little bit of apprehension today to relive those moments. And we live in Jacksonville, Florida. That's actually the girl's names. My daughter Amelia is named after my great grandma, but there's Amelia Island here, and then Anastasia came naturally because there's Anastasia Island. So my little island girls. And so we're in Jacksonville, Florida, and that's my husband is military, a former military now. He was in the Navy. And it was around the end of October that Amelia turned 1, and my entire family had traveled in because we just got over a year of COVID, and we were able to have somewhat of a celebration. It was still minimal, but my in-laws came from California. My family came from Georgia and New Jersey, and my sisters were there. And it was a great celebration. And I just felt so blessed, and I still am. But it was just a moment of really just being thankful for what was around me. And then my husband went away he had to go away for 2 weeks for the military. And so I was by myself with Amelia and a little overwhelmed and just trying to hold down the fort. And so he finally got back, and it was Veterans Day, and I didn't realize that the daycare was closed. And so we ended up bringing Amelia to the doctors with us. So it was the three of us going to look at Anastasia, and I was like, okay, this is going to be a special moment. And there still had some restrictions for COVID. Like my husband was allowed to be in the room with me for the ultrasound, but he wasn't allowed to be in the next room when we go and meet with the doctor to review the ultrasound. It was very strange. I don't know how that works.
That is so sorry.
Yeah, it is. It was so stupid. Yeah. So we went into the room and we saw the ultrasound, and I didn't have any feelings that anything was wrong. The ultrasound tech had been the same one for Amelia, and we just connected with her. And so we were just going through and just giggling and looking at her, and she was confirming she was a girl and all the things. And then I said goodbye to my husband. He had to go to work, and he knew that he couldn't be in the next room. And here I am tackling like the baby. And then the midwife came in, and she just had this sheet, like, I don't know, this just look on her face, and her face was sheet white. And I was like, oh no, there's something wrong. And she like stuttered on her words, and I would never want to be in their shoes. It's horrible to be able to deliver things like this. And I'm sure it was her first time. And I don't even really remember what she said, but I just knew that she said that there was a cleft lip and palate, and I had no idea what that was. No clue. And she's just not really even explaining it, because I just started bursting out in tears, and because I didn't know. And she's asking me if I have any questions. And I'm like, of course not. And no. I'm like, my husband should be here. Like, why isn't he allowed in this room? I was getting angry and like hostile about that, because I just felt like I wanted to turn and hug him and be okay with everything. And he wasn't there. And so we called him on speakerphone and I just said, the baby's alive. She's okay. But there is something that the midwife needs to share with you. And I'm just hysterical crying, and I couldn't even hear it. Yeah, we found out in that ultrasound, and it was, I know that a lot of people don't get that privilege, but I am thankful that we did. But it was shocking, and I just felt paralyzed.
Yeah. Every single time I have these conversations, right, and I'm able to listen to so many different stories, and it never, to me, like you telling me, I have like goosebumps. Like it never, I don't know, it gets easier listening to people's stories about just finding out and just like hearing that like raw emotion of you feel worried, you feel frustrated, you angry, concerned, scared. It's just so many things. Like I'm trying
Every
to think
single
back.
emotion. Every single emotion floods your brain, and you're just helpless because you want to search it right away. You want to find out why. You want to find out answers. And for anybody, I'm a little bit of an overachiever, type A, have control. And at the moment, you don't have any control. You have no control, and you have to give it up to a higher power, God, the universe, and really trust. But yeah, it's a flood of emotions that were just, can't even count them.
Yeah. Was your daughter Amelia still with you, or did your husband take her? Oh, the daycare was closed, you said. Yeah.
Yeah. So
So
she was
she
still
was
with
still
me.
there in that moment.
And I immediately called him. I said, you have to meet me. When I was crying
Mm.
so uncontrollably, like sobbing, he was like, you can't drive. And so he just met me, and I just got out of the car and I just melted in his arms. I just was just so thankful that I was able to see him in person and just cried. I
Yeah.
didn't know what else to do.
Yeah. What was his reaction to that? I guess I'm not sure if you, in the moment, sometimes they're just strong for you in the moment. Have you all talked about what his feelings were like after he found out as well?
Yeah, we did talk a little bit. And you
Yeah.
know what? I guess it really wasn't a good I think that's really good. I think that is something we need to revisit face to face. But to listen to him tell somebody else the story
Yeah.
is just it was admirable for him to talk about his emotions too. And he was scared. He knew it was gonna be okay. And that he is a glass half full, super positive, everything's gonna work out. But
Mhm.
to not recognize he recognized that it was a scary time.
Yeah. Okay. And did you find out was that your 20-week anatomy scan?
Yes, it was the
Yeah.
anatomy scan. Yep. And it was a bilateral cleft lip. And at that time, we would assume a palate, and which leads to a whole other onset of questions because they need to confirm whether the palate is the brain affected, is the this affected, is the
Mhm.
irritate, like all these things. It's just a chain reaction of things that could also be affected from that. Oh, and they were actually clear on that part, meaning that we would need to get more testing done to talk about or confirm anything else.
Yeah. And so you mentioned also, like, when you were given this information that you didn't necessarily know what really, like, the details of what they were talking to you about. What is it even, right? Like,
Yeah.
am I going, what am I dealing with here? I guess, so what did you do after that? I guess, what did you do in terms of research or looking or to prepare for birth or just to educate yourself a little bit?
Sure. No, this is, I think, is so important. I I grew up in New Jersey, and I grew up with the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia being a household name that was just close
Mm.
by within an hour. My sister had gone there for something when we were younger. Everybody had some kind of connection to that hospital. And my very best friend that I grew up with in New Jersey, her daughter is now 6 years old. And at the time she was 2 years old, they found out she had a tumor on her kidney. And the
Mm.
tumor was the size of a plastic water bottle, huge. And she had gone
Holy.
through the removal of that big tumor out of her body and with a minimal scar. And
Mm.
then she had to go through chemo and all the things. And so immediately I called my best friend. She has a medical background, and she is very well versed in researching hospitals. And so is her husband.
Mm.
They both have careers in medicine. And it was easy to open up to her and explain what was going on. And I couldn't have asked for a better friend to talk to
Mm.
because she just calmed me down and told me exactly what I needed to hear. And it wasn't yeah, everything's going to be right, but she made me take action or
Mm.
gave me what I could do to be productive. And really it was she helped with this too, was researching the top programs because I wasn't going to become an expert on Googling everything, although that was exactly what I was doing. And I knew that I would have to build a relationship with a program and a team. And I needed to trust them. I didn't need to be in a position where I needed to question every single thing. But you are going to have to do that. But just knowing their reputation and understanding, hey, these people know what they're doing. And
Yeah.
so we just gathered like the top programs. And it didn't necessarily mean at the time that I wanted to relocate there or live there. Or it was just like, what are these people doing different? And learning from their programs and what they have that is so special. And Children's Hospital of Philadelphia came up numerous times. And then there was a couple other programs and even one that was close by us in Florida, but it just, that got my focus. And so I
Yeah.
just called them for a consultation, and they set the standard. They set the standard for the questions for me to ask, the things that they would have lined up for me for the day if I was going to do an orientation, and how their program was. And so then I knew
Mhm.
if I wasn't going to relocate there, what kind of standard to have with other programs around me and what kind of questions to ask, if that all makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, that's so interesting because I never thought about that this way, but there was something about after finding out, you mentioned that your friend may take action, and that, um, I think that having something to do or to organize something is, like, really fitting for my personality type, and maybe it sounds weird, but it was the thing that kind of calmed me a little bit, like, me having to figure this thing out and to do like this research and to build in like what's next for her and what's the progression of this thing or her treatment plan, and figuring out where we were going to go or who was going to see her was something that was really, it just gave me, maybe it was just keeping me busy so that I didn't think about the actual, like her actual diagnosis. I was just more focused on how we were going to treat it and how we were going to take this thing head on. And you did mention that there were other programs. Do you remember what those other programs were that you didn't ultimately go to?
Yeah, there was a program in Orlando, there was a program in Baltimore, and there's a program in Boston, and those were some of the top that we were looking at. And to go back to what you were just saying, Laura, I think it's important to obviously deal with your feelings and recognize that there's something going on and we don't need to cover it up. I think I did dive right into just go plan. And there was a point where I found myself just sobbing, and that was okay. Like it was okay to have a little bit of the grieving and really recognize like this was going to be a hard journey for you and your child, because the doers and the planners and the A's, type A's, like we try to just go and
Yeah.
cover it. And so it was important to recognize it and deal with the feelings a little bit, but not to the point where it paralyzed me into a depression and I couldn't move. So it was a good combination taking that action and knowing what that purpose was, because we now know the purpose and what we're trying to who we're trying to be an advocate for.
Yeah, absolutely. Your story is so good. It's so good because there's so many things that you've experienced and that they come up. So I don't want to go on tangents as
No,
you
yeah.
talk. As you talk, I think it makes me think of other things.
Yeah.
And when your preparation, just as I was saying earlier, because you had Amelia and you breastfed her, and I guess grieving that, knowing I'm pretty sure that many specialists told you that you weren't going to be able to breastfeed. What was it? Did you grieve that at all? What were your thoughts and how were you able to move past that?
Absolutely. I mean, I just felt okay. I guess a resonating feeling that comes up for everyone during this process is guilt. I felt
Hmm.
guilty that I wasn't mom guilt, right? We hear it all the time, but there's so many aspects of this journey that it popped up. And yeah, I wanted to give the same that I gave to my other daughter. And obviously every baby is different and every journey is different. I had a hard time with that, and because it wasn't easy breastfeeding. It was something that you give up,
Hmm.
give yourself to your child. And it was something I wanted to do, and it's not for everybody. And I just felt this fear that I wouldn't bond with my baby the same way. And I just felt it was just, yeah, a fear, because you're just thinking of all these scenarios and all you're doing is thinking. But yeah, it was hard to adjust, but the outcome of it, there's so many ways you can bond with your child. And actually, I was pumping exclusively, um, and trying to provide the milk, having a 17-month-old jumping all over me and timing the bottles, like where, I could get the milk out in time for this screaming baby who's so hungry and all those things, and or warming it up so that's just the right temperature and making sure I'm on the schedule. And then I just was running myself ragged. And so after 4 months, I think the biggest blessing I did give to my bonding with my child was letting go of it and moving over to formula. That was just my journey. But
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
I think that I absolutely bonded even better because I was enjoying feeding my baby instead of stressing to get every ounce and in with her and almost to
Yeah.
the point of resenting it because I was just stressed.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
It was
And
hard.
also, there's so many mothers that worried about building that bond. And I always say breastfeeding, whether that be nursing or just whether you're at the pump, it is a labor of love. It really is. And if you're able to do it, all kudos to you. But if you're not, all kudos to you as well. And I think that, so I was never able to breastfeed. I pumped. I probably pumped for 4 or 5 months, but we were supplementing as well. So early on, it was strictly breast milk. And then eventually, as I wasn't keeping up with the pumping, but our bond was just growing because we were spending so much time together. It was just so much, so many appointments, And so day to day, I kept her at home for the first year just because I was just so worried about the feeding before her surgery. And I wanted to make sure that she was getting what she needed. So I did keep her at home. And so we have the best bond. I was just been able to spend so much time with her. And we spent a lot of times where it was just us two because my fiance had to go back to work. And so there was no shortage of bonding there. We were running the town together and it was really stressful to have to go through all those appointments and then have to just pump as well.
Yeah,
I remember
pumping. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
the very first appointment that I went to, I was literally, first of all, I was late. And so the specialist told me, okay, I can't see you now, but if you want to wait until the afternoon, I can see you in the afternoon. And so I just waited because the hospital was about an hour and a half away. And so I was like, if I go back home, that's going to be an hour and a half. And then I come back, it's just going to be crazy driving. So I'm just going to stay. But that was like my first appointment at the big facility where I was going to meet her Cleft team. And I was actually going to go see the feeding therapist. I was leaking everywhere, literally.
Yeah.
It was just so awful. And by the time, oh my goodness, by the time she saw me, she's horrible. Why didn't you tell me that you were just waiting around? I didn't know. I would have squeezed you in somewhere. I wouldn't have just made you wait that long. And I said, I didn't want to. During that time, I was delirious, but but in that same conversation, in the same theme, what was your hardest appointment?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I didn't take into consideration postpartum period when we did this relocation. And this relocation was, we sold our house in Jacksonville. My husband got a temporary transfer with the company he was with. It all lined up. It was okay. And we were able to get into a condo up in Philadelphia. It was a 3-story condo, which I know people live this on a daily basis, and I give you so much credit, okay? But my daughter would not let me put her down on the stairs. So I'm like, picture car seat in one hand, 17-month-old in the other hand, walking up and down the stairs, postpartum like a day. I'm just like, oh. And same, coordinating, getting them into the car and out the door every week because we had the NAM and we had the program where it was adjusted every week. And I honestly, off the top of my head, a single one does not stick out, just those darn stairs that go like 3 flights. And if he forgot something, I wasn't going to leave the baby in the car by themselves. So I'm like, I got to go back upstairs. And I'm just like, yeah, that was, I just, people coordinate that every day. I just was not used to it. And with the 2 babies and whatever. And then getting to the doctors, and if Amelia was so good, she had some moments. And so if I couldn't get to her and then anesthesia. It was a lot to juggle both, and I didn't have any help. But
Yeah.
I was afraid to have somebody come into the home with, like, Philadelphia was very strict with
Mm-hmm.
COVID at that point still. And so I was afraid to have people come into the home. I'm going back and forth to the hospital. I didn't want them to get exposed, any sicknesses. It was just a whole nother level. But yeah, I didn't take into consideration postpartum and trying to get around and just all that. So the pump thing, I'm like sitting there in the waiting room pumping with both of them. It was just, I can't believe what we do. I'm laughing looking
Yes.
back at it because it's just a blur of so many of those combinations that we just don't even think about. You just do. You put your head down and do.
Yeah. You're just like on autopilot. Like I think
Yeah.
back as well and I'm just like, oh my God, like how did I even like how was I even alive? Like I was and I was literally like running on zero sleep. And it was just like and then
Yeah.
I was so worried because I'm like trying to drink caffeine to stay up, but then also I'm like worried about the caffeine, too much caffeine in the milk. Just all these things. And so, yeah. So, did you move to Philadelphia after Amelia was born, or did you give birth to her there?
Anesthesia.
Oh,
So
Anastasia.
it's
Yes,
okay.
sorry.
It's okay. We're going to do this. So it's confusing. I know. Anesthesia. So we went up to Philadelphia in January. My daughter, Anastasia, was born on March 25th. And in January, we interviewed the program. And I was like, Cody, this is where we're going to be. We just loved it. And what I didn't realize, I went through the whole day and everybody was like, oh, every part of the program kept asking, oh, are you going to give birth here? And I was like, yeah, I'm going to give birth at the Children's Hospital. And not thinking that it was like you had to go through this approval process. I was just like, yeah, what am I going to do? Drive my daughter from Florida up here? I'm not flying on a plane, like them being a week old and like all this logistics wise. I was like, yeah, I'm just going to
Yeah.
give birth here. And so at the end, when I met with the actual doctor who's in charge of the maternity floor, she was like, okay, so what's your plan for giving birth? And I was like, I'm going to give birth here. And she's actually, I'm the one that approves that. And I was like, oh, I said, I'm so sorry. I didn't know this was an approval process. For cleft lip and palate babies, it's not an emergency when they're born. And contrary to belief, it is very important for early intervention. And so at this point at Children's Hospital, their cleft lip and palate team was getting bigger, and they were noticing the bigger improvement in children and thriving earlier on with the earlier intervention. And so they said, we don't normally do this because we reserve the maternity floor for those who have emergencies when the baby comes out. But we know that early intervention is extremely important in cleft lip and palate. And we would like to invite you to give birth here. And I just felt so honored and, oh my gosh,
Wow.
okay. I didn't realize it was this big process and big deal. And I was like, oh my God, thank you so much. I don't want to take away from anybody who needs it more than I do, whatever. But I embraced it. And yes, we moved up a month before the birth and we gave birth at the hospital, and we had that early intervention. And even though it was at a hospital that specializes and has an amazing cleft lip and palate team, the nurses that were involved, which are all saints, they're all amazing, but they still don't have all the training that they need. And so it was a lot of back and forth between the different doctors explaining how to use the different bottles and showing the nurses how to use, just the pigeon bottle and the Dr. Brown bottle and finding which one would work for Anastasia. And that's where it's super crucial in that intervention, because we need the babies to thrive right away. And what happens most of the time is that they're coming back 2 to 3 weeks after birth because they're not gaining weight and not knowing how to eat. And that's when it becomes the emergency instead of right out of birthing.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. So my daughter Giselle, she actually ended up being admitted to the NICU after she was born, not immediately after, but a couple of days after she was born, because the nurses just didn't know what to do. They had no idea. Like they were literally like clueless. And so the feeding therapist only came to see me. They came to see me 2 times, and it was just, it was just a mess. And I don't want to place blame on anyone or anything like that. But I also feel like with COVID, things like changed a lot. There were a lot of nurses that were like contract nurses. And so they weren't like, that wasn't like necessarily their home hospital. And so there was just a lot of people that were pretty transient. And yeah, that was really tough. And so sometimes it makes me wonder, I know cleft lip and palate aren't necessarily like common things, but it just made it feel like it was so rare. Like even with the conversations that I've had with other moms on the podcast, they said that their hospital hasn't seen a cleft lip or palate in 20 years or something like that. Of course, I don't fault anyone for just like having that information. I didn't have any information about this. I didn't know that this was going to happen to our family either. And so I have a little bit of grace in that, but certainly it just seems, I don't know, it just, I, I don't even know how, I guess the first steps in providing like nurses some information or resources or things to just be a better support to mothers. Yeah.
It's just, yeah. And that, I think I may have mentioned with you personally, that's part of when I get out of this fog of this journey, I do want to implement some kind of training for nurses on, even if it's just bottle training, because I just remember talking it over with every nurse. And I was pumping because I wanted to make sure there was enough food provided, and I want to make sure they didn't throw out my milk. And it was just around the clock. Moms, you have to take care of yourself, because this second day in the NICU, I almost passed out on the floor because I forgot to eat. I like literally went from the delivery room into the NICU and just didn't leave and barely went home and ate. And it was just that everybody's in that fight or flight mode when their child is there. But there's specifics to the bottles and making sure that it gains traction on the baby's mouth and making sure that the milk is actually going into the body. And yeah, I know it's hard, and it does make you think, even in that specific hospital where it's so common, and they have a whole program dedicated to it, but nobody gives birth at the hospital there that has a cleft lip and palate. So the nurse in that section had no clue. And I was like, somebody needs to talk to everybody. Like, you guys have your team meetings every morning? I see everybody out there. Are we reviewing? And I was just starting to become like, I requested to talk to everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Because they were threatening I'm sorry, this is the reason. Not threatening, but they were saying if she doesn't gain the weight, she's going on a feeding tube. And I said, there's no way. I said, I know that is the option and the worst, but we're missing the boat here. There's too many people involved. She got the intervention she needed, and we're not failing at this. So many people would die to be in this position, have all your help here, and I have it, and we're not going on a feeding tube.
So. Literally the same thing happened to me. Literally. They told me next day, if she doesn't get, it was like 55 milliliters per feeding, she's going on a feeding tube. And that was like, I was literally like, no, she's not. And we're going to do everything that we can so that won't happen, because I feel like I don't want to say it's like the easy out, but I guess it's just like the solution when someone is frustrated by the situation. And it's just like you said, it is the lack of nurse training and just not knowing. One of the greatest questions that my fiance asked, because I went home without my daughter, and so there was a lot of times where I would go home and come back, and so of course there would be like a new nurse there, and he said, so what is your process for like knowledge transfer? Like, how do you ensure that what we did in the morning, the next nurse that comes in knows exactly what, is going on with her? And of course, they assured us that what's in the chart and stuff like that. And we were like, well, we don't trust that because that's what they said the day before. And then the person came in and did the opposite of what we said. So it's just staying on top of it is like really important, and just asking just the right questions to just figure out what is the right intervention for your child. And so what was your initial reaction after seeing her born, seeing her face for the first time?
I was so excited. Like, oh my gosh, I tear up. I just was so excited to meet her. I was exhausted. That birth she was huge. And I just felt like that at the time. And I just felt like it was so hard to push through that birth because I was so tired from everything. And I was like, okay, hello, this is what we've been waiting for. I can't give up now. So like one of those stereotypical like movies where I'm like, I'm done. I'm not doing any more pushing. You know, so dramatic. Like, I'm not going any further. And they're like, you gotta meet her. And I'm like, okay, I'll give one more push. And I was just like so over it. But I was so excited
like
to
every
hold
woman
her.
has felt that way.
I don't know. Like with Amelia, like my first child, it was like, it was just different. So everything's different. But yeah, I was exhausted. And so I was excited to meet her. But I was also, I knew that they were going to take her away right away. And so I was like, take a picture. I'm like, let me hug her. I want to do skin to skin first. And they're like, we have to take her, honey. And I'm like, I'm coming. I'm getting off the table. They're like, no, you're not.
They're like, no, you're not.
So obviously it was relief too. I just saw her face and I knew it wasn't the normal. It was hard. She has a bilateral lip and nothing can prepare you for, but the love, obviously, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because she chose me and I'm her voice and her biggest advocate, and I wasn't going to let her down for anything.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And so was the decision to move her was she in the NICU immediately after, or they just wanted to take her just to evaluate her a little bit further?
They did I think it was protocol to put her in the NICU right away. And she was a healthy baby. Most of our Cleft babies come out healthy and strong. And we just need to make sure that they're maintaining and gaining that weight. And so after 24 hours, she was able to go into the PICU, which is a little bit less hands-on. Yeah. And so that was really good. And that was a good transition. And that's where we're just trying to gain as much weight. And then we weren't, but then we got it all squared away. So,
yeah. And so has Anastasia had both of her surgeries? Like, has she had her lip repair and her palate repair?
So really unique thing about Anastasia is that she was able to have both surgeries at the same time.
Heard that.
Yeah. So her palate didn't go all the way back. It went to a point in the roof of her mouth where it was, I guess she was able to have both at the same time. And so we did the NAM for 6 months. Oh my gosh. That program was amazing, but also like by the time they're 6 months, because most of the time the lip repair is done first and it's done around 3 or 4 months. And when you have the NAM and they're that little, they're not like ripping it out of their mouth. And it's really good because it's counteractive, like it's pulling everything together and stretching things so that there's less pulling of these parts and pieces to put them together in their mouth, and then less revision later. The NAM is a great program. And so we did our weekly adjustments and things, and we were doing that from March till September. And by the end, she was ripping that thing out every other minute. We were screaming and fighting me to put it in. I was like, I can't do this anymore. As you guys know already, I'm like a crier, and I'm like just having all the emotions. And I'm like, you know what? If it didn't go in, it didn't go in at that point. I know it did most of the work, and I was just afraid of ruining it. It's like your braces, right? If you didn't put your retainer in, you were like, your teeth shift overnight. And I was just like, is it like that? And the nurse was like, it's going to be okay. She's going to be fine. I wasn't following the directions and I had no control over it. It was just, but yeah, so she had one surgery in September of 2022, and it was the lip and palate repair. And yeah,
Oh, wow.
it's a
Okay.
big
So
deal.
yeah. So her palate, was it just her hard palate that was affected? Is that why? Or did it
Yes,
go into
yes.
her soft palate?
It was the hard palate. So it went like
It was just hard
halfway on
palate.
the top of
Oh,
her mouth. It's in
yeah.
between. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hmm. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Go Anastasia. Okay.
Yeah.
The easier, right? The better. I feel like yeah, that's a thing for me. And so the NAM process, I feel like, I don't know why. I feel like that's a little bit, I don't know, like controversial. But I don't know if controversial is the word, but I guess some families do it and some families don't want to do it. I guess I think obviously the way that you've described it, it's not the easiest thing, but I think if it were me, I would try the best that I can. I would try to follow the program as closely. And then if I didn't get it right every time, but I would try to. But you would recommend the NAM, right? Like you would say that it was worth it, you feel like?
110%. That was a big part of our move because they said they
Yeah.
could mail it to us every week and make the adjustments if we wanted to really do it that way. I really wanted the hands-on and know that I was doing it right. And it was a
Mhm.
gradual process. Like first it was taping because in a bilateral cleft lip and lip, the middle piece is what they need to stretch the most. The lip underneath your nose is what needs to be stretched the most in order for the surgery to have less revisions. And I'm not talking again medically correct here, or
Yeah.
medical terms. So I'm just trying to describe it so for a visual for everyone. But so there's tape on the lip, and we're trying to pull the lip down and stretch it. And so it's a series of little rubber bands and tape. And then the actual NAM piece comes in later, and it's like a retainer in the mouth.
Mm.
And each week, the team, it's truly a team because the orthodontist is the big part of the NAM adjustment. And
Mhm.
then the plastic surgeon is a big part of the surgery. But they talk together weekly and they communicate hand in hand the progress of everything and getting ready for surgery.
Yeah, I don't know why. I mean, I've seen like people comment, no, the NAM isn't necessary and stuff like that. Or they say, it only helps the surgeon. And I don't know. My first thought with things like that is like, why wouldn't you want to help the surgeon? I don't understand. I don't understand like why that's the rebuttal for it. Like it's just an odd
Yeah.
thing to me. It's like
I've never heard that before. I would say it's like exactly like a palate expander for your mouth, except it's a palate, you're bringing it together. And if you're slowly doing that, then the whole point. So right now, they're receiving all the studies over the past 20 years. There's finally patients that have lived the life of the NAM. And
Mhm.
they say that the revisions are a lot less for children
Mm.
who had that opportunity than when you're trying to pull your pieces of skin and your palate together when they're further apart. You have sometimes nose collapses and things like that. And
Mhm.
there's just different things that happen because
Yeah.
it didn't pull it together enough. And if you can do that and have less surgeries later, I think that's a beautiful thing. And so now they're seeing all those studies come out with the results over the past 20 years. And I think it's great. But it's a decision for each family. It's homework. It's you have to be dedicated to it
Yeah.
and you have to be involved every day in it. So
Yeah, it can be tough. I didn't experience that at all, but just in thinking about it, I know it just sounds like something that's really challenging. And then also just seeing your child just be uncomfortable, as you said, like anesthesia was ripping it out. I would be if I had to wear this thing for a couple of months. That's not something that we want to see any of our children have to go to, but it's in their best interest. And so I feel like I've only heard like really good things about the results. And I'm going to have an expert on the NAM come on to to talk about it, an actual medical professional to talk about that process, just because you're actually the first person that I've been able to talk to about it. And since it wasn't a part of our journey, it's the first time that I've been able to really understand it a little bit better. Thank you for providing context for that. And so after her surgery, what was that initial reaction the first time seeing her? I know it varies so much from mom to mom. What was that? What was your reaction in seeing her for the first time?
Oh, man, I don't even think I was really thinking results yet, because I was just thinking of how much pain she must be in, how swollen her entire face was, because she was just so swollen. She couldn't wake. She wasn't awake. We stayed overnight, and it was hard. The nurse early on talked about how Cleft baby smiles are the best because they're so wide and big. And I was like, whatever. But I really did fall in love with her. Yeah, I really did fall in love with her smile. It was so big. And I just totally got it when finally around 3 or 4 months, she's just completely all smiles. And I made sure we did some kind of photo shoot, of course, before. And document it and make sure that she sees it. Like, she'll know that she had and still has. She was born beautiful. But when she came out of the surgery, I was just in mom mode and just in fight or flight and making sure she was comfortable and making sure she could get to the next step where she could eat. And when she finally could get that bottle in her mouth, it was game on. Talk about a comeback for gaining weight and sucking down a bottle. Her eyes lit up. I just can't even, I can just, I can be in that moment again and know that she was like, oh my God, mommy, I don't have to sit here for 45 minutes and just clamp down on this stupid bottle and wait for it to spray in my mouth. I'm sucking on a bottle. I was like, yeah, babe, you got it.
God, I can't even imagine that moment. That is so cool. It's
yeah.
Wow, what a special moment. Yes.
Yeah, it was within 2 days, I think. She was just more. I'm okay, you can have whatever you want.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my goodness. The same. I would have had the same reaction. Literally whatever you want. It's just drink. Oh, goodness. You provided so much great information here. I feel like we could talk on and on. But we do have a Cleft Mom question of the week that I wanted to ask you. So the Cleft Mom question of the week is, I just found out that my son is going to be born with a cleft lip and possible cleft palate. The doctors have made a referral to the Cleft team. What questions should I ask? How do I know if this is the best team for our family? I'm terrified.
Oh, mommy, I know. And that's okay. Just take a deep breath, put your brain in charge, and take your time. Just take your time to research the program and get a second program to talk with in line with it. It's always good to shop around. No, it's good to keep the programs honest. Hey, this program, I reference it. They did this, whatever. What are they doing before birth? Are you able to meet the team? What kind of tests are they doing? Are they going to do a EKG on the heart? Are they going to check the brain and then MRI on the brain? What kind of steps do they do prior? Can you meet the surgeon? Can you meet the orthodontist? Are they in the same building? Do they have weekly meetings? And then, so right after birth, how does the one hospital talk to the team? Who's reporting to who? Are they in the same network? Do they talk with the same portals? And then I'm just rattling, all these things are firing in my head. But how soon after they give birth are you going to the team? What are you getting set up with bottle kits prior to birth? The pigeon bottles, the Dr. Brown bottles with the filters, any other Cleft Palate, Cleft bottles that they're able to give you ahead of time. Who do you call in the middle of the night if it's before you meet the team to get guidance on how to feed the baby? Can I see I would get, the earlier the better. The earlier that you can talk to a feeding specialist from the Cleft Lip and Palate team, the better.
Yeah.
And then you're keeping notes on your phone, because postpartum is the craziest thing. You don't remember anything. And so,
as you've heard
like,
throughout this episode.
Oh my goodness. Keep a notes page on your phone, and anybody you talk to, you get their name, you get their reference. And it's not to be, it's just to have knowledge and know that you can reference certain things, times, dates. You have to be a good note taker. And if your husband needs something to do, or your partner needs something to do, or your mom, or whoever your support person is, give them that task. Whenever somebody walks in the room, you have them take notes. That's going to be the biggest gift that they can give you, is helping with those situations too. Yeah, I guess I could spit fire for a while.
Yeah, no, those are all like really great questions. I think if you're able to like slow down this point of the podcast and just write all of those down, like they're like, even just in asking, who can I contact in the middle of the night if I have a question? I feel like sometimes after your baby is born and you're just, things happen, right? And you're scared and you want, a professional to be able to answer questions for you on the fly, or just to at least be available to give you a call back, just to give you some reassurance, or to get an appointment or something like that the next day. Just like the small things like that are things that you should prepare for early on. And I think that those are all like really great questions that you should be asking. The other thing is that sometimes I feel like just as people in general, we're intimidated like by medical personnel. We feel just the act of taking notes, right, during an appointment seems almost like I know I would feel like I would be challenging them. But I just want to reiterate and to strengthen you in knowing this is your child. You're your child's biggest advocate. And who cares if the people that you're trusting to care for your child feels intimidated by you taking notes or asking questions. You have the right to do that. Who else is going to do that for your child? You should. And so, yeah, I think that's really great advice, because you do forget a lot of things, getting a lot, like, just being in the shuffle of everything, and just trying to get your child the best care. But yeah, take notes so that you can remember, and don't feel, intimidated or bad about wanting to do that for your child. So yeah, just I think that Jennifer summed up a lot of great questions there. So I won't add anything additional to that. But what do you think is the best advice that you've received as a mother?
So I think I'm just going to reference a little thing that I wrote, sharing a little bit about the journey. We talked to the whole team, the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and this was my biggest takeaway. And I wrote this little journal entry about it. As we concluded our meeting and the doctor approved me as a healthy mom to give birth at one of the top children's hospitals in the world, the doctor looked directly in my eyes and said, "Jennifer, there's one more thing I need you to do." She said, "Repeat after me. I did not do this to my child." And after such a successful day and a warm blanket of comfort and even confidence swept over my fears and unknowns, I felt a huge lump in my throat and my eyes full to the brim with tears. So I did what I try to always do when deflecting those emotions in front of others. I smiled, but I could not get those words out. "Jennifer, I need to hear you say this before we leave the meeting. I did not do this to my child." How did she know? How did she know that the hardest part of this entire process was the guilt I was carrying? All the questions rushed through my head on a teleprompter flashing red, as if I was solving a case or scientific mystery. Did I eat the right food? Did I exercise enough? Did I take vitamins? Was I exposed to any chemicals? Did I gain too much weight in my first pregnancy? Was my body too stressed? And the anger part of the grieving process led me to the it's not fair questions. I didn't do drugs. I barely had a glass of wine between the babies because of breastfeeding. I was a Division I athlete and continued to be active and healthy my entire life. I used essential oils, paraben-free, organic, PBA-free, anything. And yet my baby would be born with physical birth defect that can lead to an onset of other issues, and I couldn't even begin to explain it. It just wasn't fair. But repeating those words was honestly the thing that could have happened, was the best thing that could have happened to Cody and me in this journey. And with my quivering voice and with my tears washing my face, gripping Cody's hand so hard and snot rolling down my nose under my mask, I said, I did not do this to my child. And the doctor turned to Cody and said, I need Dad to say this too. And I proudly watched him repeat the words, and our hands loosened our tight grip, and release and relief rolled off our shoulders.
So just in listening to the best advice, I think that Jennifer would give this same advice to you all that are listening. And if you want to repeat those words to yourself today, I did not do this to my child. We want to give you the space to do that now. So please just continue to be kind to yourselves and just repeat that mantra to yourselves throughout your journey, just to feel that release and that acknowledgement and knowing that you did everything that you could and you did everything right, and that you're the best advocate and the best supporter for your child, and that you will get through this. I just want to thank you, Jennifer, first and foremost, for sharing your story here with us today. And thank you all for listening to the Our Forever Smiles Cleft Mom Diaries and Support podcast. Be sure to subscribe and submit a review of the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. I hope that you have enjoyed this audio experience. Maybe you cried a little, laughed a little, but more importantly, I hope that you feel a little piece of reassurance and even joy in your journey. Talk to you next week.